This week on the Squatchers Lounge podcast, David and the Reverend Jeff talk about the epic Grover Krantz, the father of the Gigantopithecus theory. Join us as we discuss this man, some other stuff, and some other stuff. Yeah, I'm doing this live. There's not a whole lot to go on here. Grover Krantz, Grover Krantz, Grover Krantz, Grover Krantz. And not just Grover Krantz, the Reverend Jeff Kelly.
Well, thank you for that awesome introduction this week, David. We are live coming to you this week, people. Yeah, it was like that one. It's been one of those weeks. Well, let's just put it that way. We are having a great time here at the Squatcher Sounds Podcast, Season 2. This is Episode 24. We're going back to the godfathers of Bigfooting, and this week it is Grover Krantz. We're going to talk about the man, really the first professional anthropologist, the first real scientist to get on board and behind Bigfoot and find out just what drives a man to articulate his dead skeleton with his dog and donate it to the Smithsonian Institute. So
Grover Krantz isn't just a really interesting Bigfooter. He's a really interesting guy. I mean, just in general.
The dude is just really, really cool. So you know what I've got? We're going to start off the show this evening. The Tiny Top Circus last week, I brought this out to everybody in the Fringe News Bigfoot update. The Tiny Top Circus captured Bigfoot, and they said that they were going to release it in New York City to the world, and this is what we got. Meet the Tiny Top Circus's Bigfoot.
3-foot man-eating chicken was not so far off, Jeff.
Yeah, that's what I kind of called it. But I mean, here's some shots of the capture of the Bigfoot in the wild. I find it funny. I chuckle at this because this is not a hoax. This is not Hank the Bigfoot analog in a glass or plexiglass plywood piece of crap box being dragged around the country by a lying con artist. This is a sideshow gag by the Tiny Top Circus.
The end is yuck, yuck, yuck. I mean, there's no... Come on.
This is hysterical if you ask me. Now, people say, well, what's the harm in hoaxing? Well, hoaxing's different. Hoaxing's lying. Hoaxing's trying to pull the wool over my eyes to make me believe something is real when it's not, and it hurts my intelligence. This is a promotional gag to get people to come out to the Tiny Top Circus who's probably struggling to get along at this point. I love it. I absolutely just love it. So, there you go. Bigfoot is not the big scary thing that everybody wants to make him out to be. And notice he has no arms. He really is a Bigfoot.
Yeah, you don't need arms when you're Bigfoot, apparently.
Nope. There you have it, folks. He was Bigfoot at the Tiny Top Circus. I like little stories like that. They make me laugh. It's fun. It's not a hoax. It's a gag. Big difference between the two, because hoaxing is done at the cost of other people's intelligence, where a gag is just done to help increase profit in something. I don't know. What do you think, David?
Obviously the end result. This is not a blurry photo of a stump. This is not something that's being misrepresented. It's a joke. When Rick Dyer shows us a Bigfoot and says, "No, it's a Bigfoot, and I will let you see it for money," maybe that one was kind of in the same vein, and we're just, we take things a little too personally when it comes to Rick Dyer because of some of the other stuff he's pulled on us. But this is not. They're not trying to convince you that this is actually Sasquatch. This is actually a man in a pink foot costume. I mean, so right. There's a big difference in there. And hoaxing, it serves no purpose if we unless we fall for it every time. And that's where I'm really going with that. Is if we fall for it every time, well, the hoaxes will keep coming and people will still laugh at us and
exactly. And they'll keep throwing it our way so that we never, we never get away from it. And Butcher Kid, not a hoax. Butcher Kid is a funny gag. Tiny Top Circus, Big Pink Foot, funny gag. Hank Squatch, not quite so funny. Florida skunk ape hiding in the trees because you went down a canoe and saw the little macaque escape the monkeys. Not funny.
Yeah, and so using it as promotion and then kind of like leaving that nebulous open-ended thing, like, well, here is my gag, and then just leaving it open-ended. No, like, so let's bring up where people were accosting Michael Merchant, Snowwalker Prime, for putting a pink Yeti costume out there like he was a hoaxer or something. He used a pink ridiculous costume. Like, right. That is not a hoax. That is a joke. That is funny. That is, like, let's actually, like, let's have a sense of humor for a second. But when you don't, when you take like, if Doug Hudson were to come off and try to convince us that something that he did, well, we'd all know because of the background, but like a really nicely done costume in the wild, kind of glimpsy shot, like the possibly the Hoffman footage, that, and then just leave it nebulous and like, make some sort of snarky comment and just walk away from YouTube. Now that's damaging because people are going to sit there and argue about that forever.
I agree. The Hoffman footage you bring up is exactly a good point. The Harley Hoffman footage is out there, Bigfoot footage is out there on YouTube, and we weren't planning on talking about it, but you can look it up. It has some odd features to it, like a pointed ear, almost canid. It has a very strange seam line down the back side of it, and some very specifically implanted gray NTF werewolf hair that we've seen in the past used on some other Bigfoots to kind of give it the hair shine look without it really being hair shine. And it's a very well done costume, but again, it was just kind of a hit and run. It was like, wham, here it is, Bigfoot is real, and then Harley Hoffman just kind of disappeared to searchforsanta.com. And that's, no one that I know of has been able to even get an interview with who is Harley Hoffman.
Well, and it's a really interesting, like an interesting thought. Like, what was, like, the YouTube channel is Search for Santa. That's a red flag in and of itself. But what was the purpose? The purpose of this Pinkfoot, like, is to have fun and to be silly, but the purpose of
that, smile
is the purpose of that to test something? Was it nothing came out of it that went viral at the time, right afterwards?
No, the guy did not get rich off of that at all. I mean, it's been a very
and it wasn't some sort of viral campaign for, like,
not that we know of anyhow.
A movie that came out that attached to that, like, so there's a lot of interesting, like, why was it just?
When we talked to Doug in the past, he's always brought up the fact that, it very well could have been, Harley Hoffman's a filmmaker. If you really dig into his background, and that's what the question has been about that footage all along, it could have been a film test. It could have been a pitch for a movie that never got picked up. And a lot of these Bigfoot costumes are just kind of owned by the creators. They get moved around from place to place. I mean, you look at Doug's suit. Doug's suit's been featured in REI. It's been featured in a big European ski shoot. It's been featured in 3 or 4 other big name, insurance. There's been a lot of exposure to this suit out to the world. One day his suit will move on because he's created something else to use, and it'll get put into a trunk, and 10 years from now might get drugged back out and used for something else, like a film test for his kid.
Yeah. Well, I remember people were beating on Doug's door before he was even really, like, fully interested in the Sasquatch. Yeah, you, Jeff, were beating on his door, like, where the hell did this come from? We wanted to know. Because he put something on YouTube. It was not supposed to be Bigfoot related. It got picked up by Bigfoot Evidence or something like that, and boom, there it was. It was, like, all over the place.
It was kind of crazy, It was basically just test footage that got picked up and thrown out there. As, well, could this be real? And it was like, well, let's do a little bit of tracking. And it took me a couple of days to find the website where the costume was available for rent, and then to track down Doug. And Rosie Hebe of Mulder's World had a big part in that as well. And I believe he was the first one that actually knew Doug that introduced me to be able to talk to him. And it's been a great relationship ever since. But we've learned a lot about how to identify even good hoaxes, such as the, I bring it up sometimes, the Hoovie hoax picture. I mean, there's nothing else we can call that outside of the fact that it was presented as a possibly real creature when it came from a film. That is the definition of a hoax, is it not?
I would agree with that. Where you're presenting something false, to whatever end, like whether you're trying to make money off of it, whether you're trying for whatever reason, if it's false and you're promoting it as true. Now, you can be ignorant of the fact that it's not a correct, like that it's not a true photo. But it depends. Like, that's where as researchers we have to come through, and we can't just say, oh, because so and so says that is, or because somebody gave this to me, they're still working on the London trackway, but the Elba trackway and some of those other things that happened up in Washington and in Oregon. I mean, those are people gave them these trackways, and they looked into it further, and they figured out, oh well, maybe they may or may not be true.
Right, and that's where we're going at tonight with Mr. Grover Krantz. Grover Krantz is our boy, right? Grover Krantz is the first academic professional who put his professional career on the line to step forward and say that it could be possible for a large upright primate ape to still be alive in the northern continents of America and Canada. Correct?
Correct. He put his reputation and his professional career on the line and took lumps for it. Like it took him, we've heard this from Dr. Meldrum and other people. Like it took him a longer to tenure because of this interest. It's not a belief; it's an interest, right? And because of a lot of things that he was, and basically what I think it boils down to, and a lot of the research and reading that I did, is that this is why I love Grover Krantz. He was a crotchety, stubborn man, and when somebody told him the Sasquatch couldn't exist, he was like, "Puh, like, are you serious? Like, look at this, and this." And then just kept pushing. Like nobody could tell him no because he was a stubborn man, and that was and I applaud him for that. I mean that takes some gumption to stand up against all of your academic peers, up to and including if people don't understand what tenure really does, is that's a significant pay increase to stand by his guns.
Fired unless you do something really, really stupid.
Yeah,
it's job security. That's what it is, and to give that up or have that in jeopardy over a mystery primate,
a cryptid, yes, is kind
pretty
of
ballsy. Yeah, pretty ballsy. Well, you know what I do have here? I've got a 3-minute Grover Krantz's greatest hits of basically little snippets from all of the documentaries that he's done over the years. Now, some of this stuff goes back to when he's a young man, and some of this stuff comes back to when he's an old man, because, he really literally was involved with Bigfoot research and the possibilities of it for a very long time. And then after I play this 3.5-minute piece, we'll get into, really why we enjoy Dr. Krantz himself. So let's go ahead and bring the audio up here so that everybody will be able to hear that nice and clear, because Lord only knows how that intro actually came off. And we'll find out after the show. And here you go, guys. This is basically Grover Krantz's greatest hits.
Nobody really knows what causes this second bulge. Perhaps it's a muscle of some kind to support the enormous weight.
This is a cast of an individual that's very obviously crippled, and I studied this some length and found these two bulges on the outside of the foot.
Why? I think it would be morally wrong. I see no reason. In fact, I talked to a small boy, a schoolboy recently, and he said some people say shoot one to prove that they're there. And then he said, supposing the one they shoot is the last one.
Well, my answer to that is if they become extinct, so what? If they're not proven, it doesn't make any difference. We have a lot of animals that became extinct in the past, and there's nothing we can do about it. And if this animal remains unaccepted, who cares if it becomes extinct?
There are a number of footprints that I've seen that are faked, and this can be done. But on the other hand, there are a few that show some characteristics that I think could not have been faked. This is one such footprint. This cast, I've drawn in the approximate reconstructions of the bones. This is a crippled individual where a couple of bulges have... This is an example of one footprint. This is a plaster cast. which shows a crippled individual. The foot was twisted, and two bulges appear, calloused structures on the outside edges. The number of Sasquatch is very difficult to estimate, of course, but within the northwestern part of the United States, I would be inclined to estimate in the vicinity of 200, with perhaps at least an equal number in the adjacent parts of western Canada. If there were fewer than that, then it does not seem to be a viable breeding population. Any more than that, I would think they'd be seen more often. That's not as convincing as this other track. This is a 17-inch track that was picked up in northeastern Washington state. And this is what was evidently a crippled individual, because, you know, as to the total population, I've worried about this a good many times, and I'm making now a flying guess that there's, in the Pacific Northwest of U.S. and adjacent Canada, somewhere in the ballpark of 2,000 of them.
How does he know this? How does viable evidence to support
Differences come from, they lean forward at the hip more than a normal human does or should. When they put weight support on one foot, they bend the knee, so.
Whether by coincidence or design,
The Patterson subject walks with the body leaning forward and the knees largely bent, so that when it takes a step, it supports the leg with a bent knee and keeps 2 feet on the ground for an unusual length of time. It also lifts the foot very high behind each step, like so. In addition to all those things, it also swings the arms, which is very difficult to imitate, like this. Well, this is something I can do for a few steps very poorly, but the Patterson subject did it for over 300 feet. I doubt that any human being could be trained to do that.
And there you have it. You know, that's pretty much Grover Krantz's greatest hits all summed up in one place. And you can see that, yeah, he's a crotchety old bastard. He doesn't care what the academics that are scuffing up his dress are really concerned about. I kind of like him myself. I really always have.
Yeah, like steadfast in his, like, you know, enthusiasm for the subject, because I mean, really, like, and he said this specifically, basically, is that you know, if, like, another if then, you know, if Sasquatch exists, then it's potentially the greatest, you know, the greatest find in modern history. So why wouldn't you be interested in it? And if you know, like for somebody like myself, and probably him as well, if it's not an actual extant species, then it's just as interesting. You know, there's a lot of evidence to support that there may be something out there, but if there's not, that's even almost just as interesting.
Yeah, because, I mean, we have all that territory that would support such a creature, and we have a creature that actually dwells in those types of areas. It's actually more interesting if there is that type of creature out there. So let's go back to just a moment or two before here, and we'll talk about, you know, exactly who is Grover Krantz. Well, Grover Sanders Krantz was born November 5th, 1931. He was a professor of physical anthropology at Washington State University, perhaps the most famous to the general public as one of the few scientists not only to research Bigfoot, but also to express his belief in the cryptid's existence. Throughout his professional career, Krantz authored more than 60 academic articles and 10 books on human evolution, and conducted field research in Europe, China, and Java. Does Java even exist anymore? I'm not quite too sure. Outside of Krantz's formal studies in evolutionary anthropology and primatology, his research on Bigfoot drew heavy criticism and accusations of fringe science from his colleagues, just like Dr. Meldrum always complains about, and, you know, costing him research grants, promotions, delaying his tenure at the university. Further, his articles on the subject were rejected by peer-reviewed scholarly journals, a la not the Ketchum Project. However, Krantz was tenuous on his work and often drawn to controversial subjects such as the Kennewick Man remains, arguing for their preservation and study, and he was also described as having been the only scientist and lone professional to seriously consider Bigfoot in his time, in a field largely dominated by amateur naturalists. So that's pretty much in a nutshell who Grover Krantz was.
And a lover of gigantic dogs.
Yeah, dude, Irish wolfhounds.
Irish wolfhounds. If you've never seen an Irish wolfhound, like,
Bring a saddle.
Yeah, bring a saddle to the dog park when you go.
That's right. Yeah. Bring a saddle and a ham hock. Don't bring a doggy biscuit to leash. Bring a saddle and a ham hock, because you're going to need them. Yeah. So Dr. Krantz really, you go back and you watch all the old documentaries, which I was doing just this week, because I do that kind of stupid stuff. And you'll find not the In Search Of, but like it was the Lost Creatures of the World or something. But it was Leonard Nimoy again. But it was done in the 80s, I want to say it was. And Dr. Krantz was talking about the way Patty turns and looks, and him being a primatologist and an evolutionary, anthropologist. He knows a lot, like we talk about all the time, how the head fits onto the skull. And I was going to give David that opportunity to kind of tell us again, what makes the difference between how the ape's head attaches versus the human attaches versus what we think the Bigfoot attaches.
Well, so, Dr. Krantz, let's just first say that, he was a huge proponent of the Gigantopithecus theory. He was the grandfather. He was the one who actually attached the North American Sasquatch being to the East Asian Gigantopithecus fossils.
Tell us that story of the fossils.
Okay, well, so the fossils. That what von Koningswald was in a Chinese apothecary. He found some teeth that were labeled as dragon teeth. For medicinal purposes, you're going to grind them up and do whatever you do with that.
And that was before Krantz was born. That was the 1920s. Wasn't it 26, 27, 31, something like that?
1932.
31, 32. That's right.
Yeah. So they take these teeth, and actually, von Koningswald, who was also really interested in modern human fossils, thought that they looked to be gigantic hominin, like human, gigantic, human ancestors, yada yada yada. That gets thrown out. Further study, they match up perfectly with all these other fossils that go all the way to Turkey and up into Europe. That is this genus of Gigantopithecus, described only by all of these teeth that are similar, and are also very similar to that of the much smaller modern orangutan. But the interesting thing about Gigantopithecus, I'm going to say this improperly. Gigantopithecus giganteus, yes, is about the same size as a large Sumatran orangutan.
Correct.
They're just a very large, large-bodied ape. And it's Gigantopithecus blacki is the one who everybody thinks, okay, well, this is our, 800-900 pound ape because of these gigantic teeth. But we're really extrapolating out of 4 inches of jawbone and a few molars. And we do have some dentitions off the front of the mouth, and that shows us kind of what they were eating at the time, and wear patterns. And there's actually carbon material of bamboo and other things on there, so we know kind of what they were eating. We know they have cavities, so they're probably eating fruit as well. So Grover Krantz was actually the creator of this skull, which is what everybody goes directly back to when they're talking about Gigantopithecus, which this skull is based very closely on a modern gorilla skull.
Yes.
Versus
an orangutan skull.
An orangutan skull, or even more importantly, the Shiva-Pithecus, which would have been the predecessor to the line that gave us Gigantopithecus and orangutan, which is very similar also to orangutan, which has that kind of elongated snout. And so this robust piece of jaw might not have fit exactly into the skull the way that it was said to, and this large sagittal crest is evident in large male orangutans, but maybe not so much. It was basically placed there, this large fin, because of their diet, which was bamboo, and you need a lot of chewing, stamina and force, so these big muscles that would probably have to attach up there to break down bamboo would have made sense. But they were also a frugivore, and we know that chimpanzees don't have this big, so they were kind of not related to the African apes, more closely related to orangutans. But I mean, there was a whole array of these East Asian apes. And you know, something like this may not be as far off as we think, because you know, as you start to get things to be at a gigantic stature. But what Jeff was trying to get me to talk about before I go off on a tangent was how erect this, which is it looks to be Bill Munn's Gigantopithecus recreation, which was done off of some pretty good science, and Grover Krantz's Gigantopithecus skull. And if you look at how erect that is because Grover Krantz made a case for Gigantopithecus blacki. None of the other, like not necessarily the other ones, but Gigantopithecus blacki, because of a very wide base of the jaw being erect, because we have a widened jaw based on length. There's a lot of other interesting things about our skull versus a chimpanzee, or like the long snout of an orangutan. But this wide angle on the jaw, he supposed could be to let the trachea come from below rather than kind of at an angle behind, based upon how the head sits on the neck and where that connects. So if it was wide, that meant bipedal. So really, he's taking a very small piece of articulation off of one particular specimen, and this is why they're saying, you know, it's a little bit fringe.
Creating a hypothesis on how the rest of the animal might look.
It's kind of an artistic rendering and rendition, which is fair game. If you look at a lot of the recreations of dinosaurs and this and that and the other, and we come and we find more things, we find actual like skin preserved in rock, and we're like, whoa, we were way off on that. It's like, you know, the Tyrannosaurus was blue or something so crazy like that. You know, so he was doing with the information that he had, which is a 4-inch piece of bone, creating an 8-foot gigantic ape man. And what people accused him of was doing that with this belief, or this intrigue in the Sasquatch question, and this hypothesis in the back of his head that these large, gigantic teeth and molars in East Asia could have come across Beringia, much like we all say, you know, like that's the crux of this. Is like, okay, if it was here in East Asia, it could be in the Western United States, because that was open on many occasions. Okay, so these large molars are attributed to the large ape that people are seeing over here, but we have no documentation, and apparently not the right limestone caves that porcupines drag decaying bones into to fossilize.
Right, and that's exactly the case on that. You know, could Gigantopithecus blacki be the base of the Himalayan Yeti? Absolutely. I mean, it's proven that the Gigantopithecus family lived throughout Asia, not just China. So could that creature still be what's descending there, and, you know, is the large primate that they see up in the Himalayan mountains? I don't know. I know that they find weird footprints that look primate-like up there that aren't explained by any man, and the Sherpa are afraid of something, and those people aren't afraid of nothing. So, you know, obviously there's something up there for, you know, the researchers to be got. But as we say about the things in Australia, if it's not Gigantopithecus blacki from Asia, where did it come from?
So here's the interesting problem that people keep pointing out. Well, there's a few problems in the Gigantopithecus theory, and one of the problems is that Gigantopithecus seems to be Gigantopithecus blacki, because the other Gigantopithecus that you find throughout Asia are more widespread. The big guy, the one that we're pointing our finger at, Gigantopithecus blacki, that's a particular species of a particular genus. So Gigantopithecus is kind of like,
right. This is the white-tailed deer of Gigantopithecus blacki.
Yeah, that would be like trying to say, okay, well, a human. Well, no, that includes Neanderthal now. All of a sudden, like so like in all these other extinct things, like if there's still Gigantopithecus blacki, well, then there's got extinct cousins all around it. So this is the one that we're looking at in particular, because it was the big one, and it seems to have a very specific diet that is tied to bamboo. One another hypothesis of the splaying of the jaw, and why it's so wide, not because there was an esophagus and windpipe and erect status, was actually that it was a deformity, because bamboo actually, like over the course of time, about every 10 years has a massive die-off, and what they were seeing in those jaws and some of like almost the horse buck teethness and some of the other decalcifications would have been signs of malnutrition, because there could have been, being every 10 years, this is an ape that probably they assume lived to be 28 to 35 years old, just like a lot of the modern apes, would have seen multiple die-offs in their lifetime, and these are major events like where you starve for long periods of time, and so those the teeth and the way that they were and the jaw and the way that it was characteristic of malnutrition in large apes, and you can actually see that in gorillas and orangutans, and so that's one huge problem with the erect status of the so we can show examples of this in known apes, and then we have to just take on. This is why Grover Krantz has always been on the fringe as far as his peers are concerned, because he's made a few statements that, while they make sense and while they were grounded in good logic, he didn't like to hear, because he was a stubborn man, I like him for that, he didn't like to hear that there was maybe another explanation. And
not unlike any other scientist we know, when we block against their particular belief system in what their study has reflected upon them.
But the most important part about being a scientist is it's the most exciting when you're wrong, because you've learned something.
Right.
When you were convinced one direction and you were wrong, that means that you have learned something, absolutely, because somebody convinced you that your beliefs, hypotheses, suppositions were incorrect. That's exciting.
Well, yeah, and one of the things I noticed on that 3-minute excitement list from Grover Krantz is great to see. Is he went from the thought of there being 200 animals in the Pacific Northwest and another 200 in Canada to there being 2,000 across his research studies. Earlier in the video, when he's a young man and his face is all shaved, he says 200 and 200 probably, and then later on, as he's a gray man, as he's taken a stab in the dark, he makes a larger claim of 2,000. And any biologist will tell you, in most cases, for a breeding population to survive, it takes 2,500 animals in any migratory area, which means in order for those animals to find enough suitable mates to not be inbred, there has to be at least 2,000 to 2,500 animals in the gene pool that's accessible to all, which means some of these animals are going to be moving large distances to get out of their gene pool. And as those may a lot of times be those rogue males that we hear people talking about and are more likely to be seen when they're out and about. And that was one of the things that I kind of appreciated, is that even though he was as hard-nosed as he was about the subject, it seemed that he did learn from his own research that they are much more God, I can't think of the word I want to use.
Prolific.
That's the one. Then everybody would first believe that they were in his early years of study.
And again, we're dealing with media, we're dealing with documentaries. Was he saying 200 in Western Washington and 200 in Lowerland, Western Canada, and then 2,000 like nationwide, like in North America? Okay, well, you think about it though, 2,000 in North America. I mean, that's like that. I don't know. That's like finding a grain of sand in a stack of needles.
Right. I mean, it's impossible. And even like, I'm going on an expedition here soon. I can't exactly tell you when, but I'm going on an expedition here soon. I honestly am expecting on this one mountaintop for there to be between 1 and 7 animals within a 50 square mile radius of where we'll be stationed. That's it. And that's a big area. Several mountain caps, 7 animals, maybe 11 tops, maybe 2 small pods and a male roaming around, but by no means are they packed in there 50 at a time.
Unless you go to Sylvanic.
Right, unless you hang out
Yeah.
with the Bigfoot North Project. He can get you on Bigfoot every single time they go out, I hear.
Duh. How else are you going to sell tickets? But I think, yeah, the most interesting thing about Grover Krantz and his Gigantopithecus theory is the fact that there was a large ape, and there are a lot of things that you can suppose and extrapolate and wonder about. It's just the data set for all of the Gigantopithecus genus is
a few teeth and a piece of jawbone.
Well, it's a few thousand teeth, or maybe it's like 20,000 teeth.
Is that many now? Wow.
There's a lot. Okay, so there's a lot of this, because teeth in the enamel. They were.
Porcupine can't digest it. It's one of the only things that gets left behind. Bones can be digested. Hair can be digested. Teeth kind of get left. Teeth, fingernails, hair, feathers. These are things that normally can't be digested.
Yeah, so they're cast aside, and whatever was happening in China, apparently a lot of gigantic apes were dying because they went extinct, because of a lot of things, and like. So it really does make sense. One of the other actual, this is just an interesting factoid about Gigantopithecus blacki. One of the environmental factors that led to their extinction that we can almost calculate was the arrival of not Homo erectus like the Eastern Homo erectus, the early one, but basically Heidelbergensis and modern Homo sapiens. They were extinct by the time we got there, as far as we know. But more complex humans, basically, their arrival was coincidental to the extinction of.
Gigantopithecus blacki. Yeah, that's
killed all of the large mammals in East Asia and North America. That's basically how it goes.
There's another point that you had made too earlier that I kind of wanted to point out as well. If one existed, then thousands of variants at some point across the millions of years of development and evolution in that creature existed as well. So not only would there be just the Gigantopithecus blacki at the end, unfortunately that's the only fossil record that we've been able to identify in that specific line of traveling. But did it come out of the orangutan line? Is it directly in that line, or is it again one of those little divergences that come a little bit slightly later and it has its own line of evolution?
There's definitely a point of because of the lack of data on this particular species. I mean, it's more interesting to us, like more people like the Oreopithecus and the Shivapithecus than Gigantopithecus in like primatology and like paleoanthropology, right? But Bigfooters like Gigantopithecus because of Grover Krantz. Yeah, I mean, this was something that like it's a distant cousin of orangutan, which is the only surviving pongid that we have, and like. So I mean, you're looking at something that actually. So if what do they say? Like gorillas and humans were orangutans diverged from our line of evolution about 16 million years ago. It was after that Gigantopithecus went off on its course, and it was after that. With these other species and the main species, like I keep bringing up, Shivapithecus is kind of like the parent species of that whole branch of Gigantus, and then goes down through and like leaves out, the orangutans and all these other things. Oreopithecus went east and all these other things. So yeah, I mean, that's a totally different web of evolution, and to bring bipedalism into a bamboo munching, sometimes frugivore, because they found cavities that they were eating fruit because they had enough sweets on their gums to drill cavities in. So to make that a bipedal creature at 800 pounds would be very difficult.
Yeah, I mean biologically speaking, I was having this conversation earlier in the lounge with somebody. Biology doesn't have uniques. Biology normally uses one rule for all. So the larger the creature is, the more limbs that it uses for mobility. So if it were a smaller ape than what the ones that came for it before it were, maybe you could make a case for bipedalism, but if it's a Gigantopithecus version of, this small Sumatran type orangutan creature, the likelihood that it walked on two legs most of the time is kind of slim.
Yeah, well, let's put it this way: like the orangutans are an arboreal, like that's a trait that they gained because their parent species was actually a ground-dwelling ape, much like a chimpanzee, and had much more equally. It was much more equally proportioned than orangutan. Orangutan evolved to have the longer limbs and the body proportions that the orangutan has. Gigantopithecus probably started with this larger ground ape physique, but by the time it got to be that gigantic, to stand itself up erect that would be a feat of evolution that was never before seen. I mean, our ancestors were like 3.5 feet tall when we ended up standing up,
Right, so, and we actually had to evolve the hips in a direction to be able to maintain that type of evolution. We're no other great ape that we know of besides the reported Sasquatch, video that we have showing a bipedally walking ape, unlike a human. No other apes have accomplished it yet.
Yeah, but so again, my point is this consistent bipedal walking at 800 pounds is going to be. It'll be a trick. It'll be Bam Bam the gorilla. It'll be something. And that's not even extended. That's not even bipedalism. That's just sort of a trick.
Right.
Something that they can do if they needed to do it, but it's not going to become a mode of transportation. Like our ancestors at like 70 to like 80 pounds. That's going to be something that you could probably carry yourself for long enough to really build up the right amount of muscles and to pass that along, and have that be a naturally selected trait that's gonna do well for all of us.
Right, and to think that evolution doesn't happen overnight. Evolution happens in a spider web over gazillions of matings and pairings in between, and at the end there's a few mutations that are left that battle for dominance until one finally wins out, and here we are. I mean, that's how it all happens. So until there's some giant discovery of a fossil layer where, Asia and Africa were all swampy, tarry pits where these things fell into, and we can get complete skeletons to actually see how these things were put together, again, we go back to what Matt Knapp was putting out in Bigfoot Crossroads, that Bigfoot needs a reboot. Why do we do the things that we do? Well, we do them because we heard other people did them and got results. But that doesn't mean that the results were proper.
Well, yeah, exactly. What were the results? I'm all for taking some TNT and just.
I'm with you, man. Let's start fresh and see if we can't get some new techniques that work.
Or use so here's my thing, is that the old guard of Bigfooting are using these techniques that get the results that they want to get, but they're not using the techniques that are readily studyable. Like, you can actually get the information, what the professional wildlife biologists are using to do the same type of work. And you do have to look at, and you can even take it, basic, like just, it doesn't have to be just apes, but you have to look at primatology. And because, when we start talking about doing things like, oh, well, the moose does this and the bear does that, well, we're not looking for a moose or a bear. That's confounding the situation. Like, we need to look for a primate and a big primate, but let's just generalize as much as possible until we find something that works, and then we'll find something specific.
Yeah, and I got news for you. Turkey hunting in the South is not the same as turkey hunting in the North, and it's not the same as turkey hunting in the West. It's all kind of different ways to turkey hunt the same animal. What works in one place may not work in another place, and it may actually drive animals away in yet another third place. So it's kind of time to take a big step back and go, None of what I have is actually producing any video or pictures or trackways, but I hear these animals. Maybe we should change what we're doing. It's a good idea.
Yeah, and so there's the hunting tracking camp, and then there's the forest people habituation camp, and somewhere in there we need to bring in the science camp with the outdoorsmen and the habituators and get together and be like, okay, so what is the unifying piece of data that we can all extract, and how do we get it, and why does that work?
I would honestly say that the only thing that we have that goes across the board in all the camps are footprint casts and unidentified howls. That's about what transpires across both camps that I can think of.
And every time we get something genetically tested, it turns up as to be another animal, or somebody is trying to pull one over on us.
Right. Now, if anybody watched last week's Finding Bigfoot, the turtle man had some hair that he done pulled off of the barbed wire fence when he was a kid, and they done had it there tested, and it came back as unknown primate. Now, I would have liked a little more information about that in Finding Bigfoot, but we know that's for entertainment purposes for Joe Q public out there, and they didn't really get into it. And I might actually have some availability to ask some questions about that to a few people, so I may search into it. However, it comes back as uncatalogued primate. That's the first actual quotation I've heard of that, which I like that type of title.
Uncatalogued primate. So here's again, it goes to the testing, and you can test for the results that you want, which was kind of what Melvin Ketchum was doing. If you're using primate primers, we want to decide if this is a primate, and we're looking at this section because primates fall like this, and if you sequence a cow or a horsetail or something like that, it's not going to match up with any known primate. So it's now an unknown primate. But
yeah, that's very true.
So it's a mammal, and it's so a lot of everything's going to match, and it's just not going to line up right where we know in GenBank. So now all of a sudden it's an unknown primate because you tested primate and it's not known for that sequence.
Because if you test human DNA in certain places, you'll come up with banana, and you'll come up with termite, and you'll come up with tree, you'll come up with all kind of blades of grass, because we share 15 or 20% of our DNA strands with everything on the planet. So if it's biological and it's made of carbon, chances are at some point you test the DNA, you're going to find primate in it.
I think I actually share up to 30% of the DNA of the virus that's attacking my nose and sinuses right now.
Yeah, hay fever. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I mean, viruses are. So I mean, DNA testing, take it for what it is. That was that deal. I like the turtle man. I think dude was probably telling the truth. I mean, he's got no reason to lie. I mean, they found that hillbilly in the middle of nowhere and made him famous, and now he's got some money, and good for him. I mean, because I think he's the real deal. I really don't think he's a made-up character. Dude is diving into muddy-ass puddles, chasing after snapping turtles. Don't really have any reason not to believe that that's real.
But again, it's on TV.
Yeah, that's true, because if you look at the Duck Dynasty guys before they were the Duck Dynasty guys, you'd swear they were boy band members. I mean, these were clean-cut, polo-wearing, hanging out at the beach yuppies until somebody said they can make a bunch of money on TV if they grew their beards out. That's not a joke, people. Look it up. It's out there. Those people are 100% bullshit, and they're taking your money and laughing. Just letting you know.
Yeah, they were all driving German cars before they went Ford.
Oh yeah, they were yuppie living in mansions. This whole hillbilly thing ain't nothing but. I'm sure they've got a producer in the back going, "Hey y'all, you know what'll be funny? Let's try this. I bet you they'll believe it." It's just absurd what the general public will accept as real these days. And, well, I guess you can't blame the documentaries for pulling over this whole, the Yeti, the killer lives. I mean, that wasn't even a Bigfoot. They couldn't even get their story straight. It was either a Bigfoot or it was an Alma. Which one was it? I mean, you can't have both ways. But
Wait, it wasn't a Yeti?
Right. It wasn't even a Yeti. Imagine that. So, back to it. There you have it, people. That's what Grover Krantz was about. Grover Krantz was really the first guy to take the academic world and say, you know what, you don't have to like it. I've got enough credible evidence out there to say that it's possible. And if it's not, that's even more interesting. So I'm going to continue to study it. Yes, he pushed a lot of theories out there that we're still kind of following today that we need to take a big step back and take a look at. That who cares if they're true? We don't really care where the species comes from at this point. Like Cletus said way back in his interview, and I ain't worried about pro-kill or, pro-not-kill. Let's be pro-fine first, and we can worry about what the species is later.
Grover Krantz, just as on the by and by, was very much pro-kill. He's like, take one down. Physical anthropologist needs a body every time because that's what they do. Unless they have a corpse, they can't study any, like a lot of the portions of that. So they need something physical to actually look at. So he was like, you know what? If it's the last one, take it down and we'll apologize later because
it happens. What's the point of it existing if it can't be cataloged? That's exactly what he said. We heard him say it himself firsthand. So what's the point of it being out there if it can't be cataloged and exist? There's no point of it still existing. If it's the last one, well, so be it. Although we all can agree that there's plenty of them out there. This isn't the last one.
Yeah. Well, and for me, like, I don't even think that, like, having to take one in that capacity is really as necessary as some people think, because if you can shoot it with a gun, you can shoot it with a camera, and instead of running away or just taking the film with you, you can get the evidence from the creature either leaving or bring a buddy and have them film the Sasquatch beating the crap out of you and taking your arms off and beating you to death with them. Something. I mean, that's proof, right?
Yeah, so. See, and I'm of that camp anymore. I think I've swung back the other way, for a while there. I didn't see a need to take one, but anymore, like I said before, you cannot blame, I'm being friends with Justin, and I understand the campaign that he is on at this point, for years now. 2010 is when that happened. We were going on 4 years now of people not believing him, calling him a liar, and still calling him out, and yet he's still here. Okay, if it wasn't true, why would he still be here? Why would he still be doing this? Why would he still be spending his money? He's not rich. Been on a TV show. I got news for you. Didn't make a penny. Actually cost him money to go and be on the TV show, which had happened to most of those people that were on it.
Yeah.
Wasn't the purpose of doing the TV show at all. But here he is. He's still here, and he's going to kill another one if he gets the opportunity. And the Friends of the Forest people have nobody to blame but themselves. When you call a man a liar and you give a man no choice but to make the story true, well, I guess he goes out and takes another one, doesn't he?
Like that's the interesting thing about the Justin story. Like, I met the guy, I've talked to the guy. I think he truly believes his story. And there's a lot of reason to believe that there's some credibility behind the story. And the guy, he's not pushing anything anymore. He's not self-promoting. Like, we're talking about him right now because
I'm friends with the guy.
Yeah, exactly. But he's not self-promoting, but
No.
he's still out there on a regular basis doing his thing and trying to come up with a plan for how to
solve the solution, solve the problem. That's what this man's, he's trying to solve a problem.
Exactly, and that's what I did with me going through and looking at the fossil record and doing that's what Grover Krantz did and finding his Gigantopithecus as the null hypothesis, just like, hey, this is the best solution to the problem I see. I'm not right. He's not right. Justin is a liar. So what do you do? Well, you go and you
prove that you're not a liar.
Yeah, you try to prove that you're not a liar. Justin's got a lot more to lose and gain in the situation than somebody like myself, where I can just back off and say, yeah, you know what, I'll wait a year and then I'll go back out there and I'll do it again.
Right. And I've spent an extensive amount of time with the man. I mean, personal time. I've met his family. I've had dinners with him. I've slept under the man's roof. I've been fishing and camping with him. I've never known him to lie to me ever. on anything. I mean, the kid likes to hunt and fish and eat things that he hunts and fishes. That's what he does. And if it's going to take putting a hole in one so that he can get HD footage and a big old chunk of this thing and drop a body on the news station doorstep so that everybody shuts the hell up about it, then that's what the kid's going to do. And I don't blame him for doing it. It's an animal that's out there. It's not a person. It's not a human. And in California, if it's not on the game list, shoot it. There's nothing wrong with what he's doing here in California. If you don't like it, change the laws. But for now, that's the answer to his question, to prove to everybody who's called him a liar and a charlatan for the last 4 years of making up some super hysterical story that could never be true, which actually his story is not all that super hysterical, and it very well could be true. You know, to prove to everybody, to shut them up and say, here it is. Now, what do we do?
Stay the course.
Exactly. We have a Bigfoot body. Now what do we do? You go and watch that podcast with Rose Sahibi. That's what you do. And you can see what we were talking about on how to handle once you've got a Bigfoot body. Got to get it somewhere. And all that's actually out there. You can find it in the archives on youtube.com/SLounge podcast. This is part of the show where we tell everybody come out and see us at Facebook. We have a group going on out there, facebook.com/SLounge. That'll bring you into the group discussion. And we're talking about Dogman and UFOs and aliens, Bigfoot, all kind of crazy crap out there. You'll find Mitchell Wilson and Alita Schultz and me and David and superstar Kip Morrill. Did I miss anybody in the admins group? All kind of people. Buck Nye, hey buddy, you are a great dude, man. I'm glad to be your friend on Facebook. I'm glad to have you in the lounge out there today. You can find our fan page at facebook.com/SLounge podcast. That'll actually bring you into all the updates that I share and we share from across Facebook that's Bigfoot related, and you'll have all the shows available to you there as well. Facebook does suck. They only show 10% of our viewership the actual posts. So if you find our posts on Facebook and you'd like it, and you'd like other people to see it, just give it a like and a share, and that actually goes a long, long way. 20 more people will actually see it. David, buddy, Grover Krantz was a blast, man.
Yeah. We were a little disjointed, technical difficulties in all of this, but no, I mean, he really is the first academic that looked into this subject, and an important part of this whole story, because he gave us the Gigantopithecus theory, and that's really driven a lot of modern Bigfootery, and it's very, very interesting, and we didn't even talk about our last episode. We talked about Ivan Marks and the Cripplefoot cast. Well, that was something that really drove Grover Krantz to believe, and now we know that that's coming from some sort of a less than
honorable source,
less than a reputable source. Really, you have to take a step back and look at, unfortunately that particular foot was
probably bogus to begin with. And, that was one of the things. I did want to bring that up, and I'm glad you mentioned it. The whole Cripplefoot thing with Ivan Marks, and Grover Krantz's buying into it, I don't necessarily know that at the time that Grover Krantz was talking about the Cripplefoot casts and they were doing these documentaries, that the Ivan Marks Cripplefoot footage had actually even been released at that point. So, you're talking apples and oranges at that point, and Grover was going on what he could go on at that point, and we know at this point it may not have even been a Cripplefoot cast to begin with, that Ivan Marks just made the video up to go along with the sighting and the castway that came along later. Also, on that note, we failed the Biscardi connection last week. Many people actually emailed me and said, you said you're going to give us the Biscardi connection and said like one sentence about it. So let me go ahead and clarify what happened here. Basically, Ivan Marks was the first profiteer for Bigfooting. He took a carny attitude of, I'm going to make as much money off of anything fantastical Bigfoot announcement as I can. I'm going to make documentaries, and I'm going to take as much money as I can and go away with it. Well, Tom Biscardi was a young, for lack of a better term, con artist who was taken under the wing by Ivan Marks and basically taught the tricks of the trade of how to make documentaries on Bigfoot to make profit and sell them. basically they worked hand in hand all through the. Ivan Marx's documentary was released in '71. Tom Biscardi's documentary was released in '72. I mean, his very first documentary was released 1 year after Ivan Marx. I mean, you can tell directly they probably are using the same costumes. I mean, that's literally how closely these guys were working together, and they had the same Barnum-esque attitude. And there's always one bottom line: get that money, sucker. That's what Barnum and Bailey was about. That's what Ivan Marx was about. That's what Tom Biscardi's been about all along.
Exactly. And he tried to sell Peter Bird Mickey Mouse.
Mickey Mouse, yeah, Mickey Mouse, that for $50,000, Mickey Mouse, yeah. So there, I mean, there's basically the big trifecta of Ivan Marx, Tom Biscardi, and Grover Krantz. I think Grover Krantz was just desperate to get his fingers on anything Bigfoot related, and unfortunately it came along with Ivan Marx, and he just didn't have the chance to throw it all out before it got ugly. Now next week, we're having an off week, actually. We're taking a vacation day next week, David. We will be gone. We're going to be gone until the week after. So we will be gone June 18th, and we'll be back on June 25th with the great John Green.
That's going to be epic.
Yeah, I'm thinking so too. I thought I'd put a big smile on your face because
Yeah.
we hadn't even discussed it up until now. But yeah, I figure where else is there to go? I mean, John Green's the fourth horseman. Let's dig it out and get on board with who was John Green. And God, I've read just. I don't have them many. I wish I had all the books of John Green's I've read. I mean, seriously. He's another one of the guys that a lot of the theories come from, and we'll talk about those theories and see if we can't take maybe a modern-day twist on how we can make them just a little bit better.
That would be, yeah, that's going to be a good one. And we have 2 weeks to study because there's a lot of data.
There's like 72 books, 140 articles, 9 movies. I mean, it's just going to be just an astronomical night. We may even do like a 90-minute edition on John Green.
Yeah, we'll just have to let that one just go.
Yeah, I think we're going to do a 90-minute edition on John Green. So, guys, it's been an awesome friggin' show this week. David, I want to thank you, sir. I know we've had technical difficulties the last couple of weeks. We're going to get you all fixed up after the show, and so we can't get it figured out. Thanks for coming in tonight.
Here we are, doing it like always.
That's right. Flying by the seat of our pants. I am the Reverend Jeff Kelly for David Batdorf. We are in the Squatchers Lounge podcast. We're doing season 2, episode 24. And if I ever find the stupid, that thing, if I actually ever find a theme, we'll get out of here tonight. I want to thank everybody for joining us, and may the Squatch be with you.
Grover Krantz.
Suckmyballs@hatemail.com.
That's right. Suck it!